this episode, I'm going to be batching out bridges for my orchestra model cutaway style 56 guitar models. And I'm going to take you guys along for the ride. So our journey begins, as most things do here at Eric Schaefer Guitars, with a solid oversized billet of the wood in question. In this case, it is Macassar Ebony. I've got enough thickness to this material here that I can split this billet right down the middle and still have enough thickness between the two pieces to cut bridges out of. So I can make a lot of bridges here, and that's what I plan on doing. So I've scribed a line straight down the center of the billet's thickness, and now I'm following that line with a resaw bar attached to my fence. The resaw bar allows me to adjust and correct for bandsaw drift as I commit along this extra long length of a piece. Now, before I cut out each individual bridge blank on the bandsaw, I'm going to use a Forstner bit first to pre-drill out this tight radius area on the one side of the shape here, where this little hook is. And the reason for that is simply because the 1/4-inch bandsaw blade that I'm using, even if I was using an 1/8-inch bandsaw blade here, either way, it would be a difficult thing to ask of the bandsaw blade. There's a lot of thickness to this material, and on top of that, this is a very tight radius. The combination of thick piece of wood and tight radius is not a good combination for a bandsaw blade. So, if I significantly reduce the thickness of the piece, the drill press here first, then that significantly eases things up for the bandsaw, and I should have no problem cutting that curve. Or I may skip that area entirely with the bandsaw and clean that up with the spindle sander after the fact. But either way, reducing the thickness of the material in that area, in that tight curve, will be helpful for shaping this later on. I've carefully punched out the locations for my bridge pin holes using my template. Now be careful here, this might seem like a very cut and dry process, but actually, even with those template holes accurately located, there are a lot of ways to still drill your holes just slightly off. It's actually a very difficult task to get these holes to be exactly where you want them to be. Harder than it seems. The best way to do it is with a very reliable template, which actually I'm not going to get into here, but in a future video I will talk about drilling these holes very, very accurately. One thing I do want you to notice here, though, is how every time I drill a new hole, I slide the scrap board underneath over just a little bit. And that's so every time there's fresh scrap wood beneath each hole location so that I don't get excessive tear out on the backside. So I've been making these ebony bridges here for number 56, and I was going to make also an ebony bridge for number 57, but along the way I actually decided to adjust my course here and instead start working on a maple bridge. And I just wanted to talk for a moment here about an adjustment I had to make on this maple bridge, which actually has nothing to do with the fact that it's maple and has more to do with the fact that the fretboard here is much narrower, and this was by design, than the other fretboard. So I knew at some point I would have to come back to my bridge hole locations and adjust them to fit that more narrow width of the fretboard. So, and you can basically determine that by running a straight edge off of each side of the fretboard and determining where those straight edge marks are going to be, and then setting your outside E-string holes as far inward of the straight edge on each side. And from that, the easiest thing to use is one of these nice locking digital calipers here, and you can do a little math. You know, you have your outside E-string holes and just divide that by 5, and you'll get the distance that you want to set your caliper to, so that then you can take this and just mark each hole in succession. So just thought that was a cool thing worth mentioning. One that I've aesthetically decided to go with something just more fitting to the colors on this instrument here, like the binding, which is also maple. And I wanted to show you how the locations of the holes are not always one size fits all for all instruments. You may have to adjust them if you choose to make a different sized neck, which I have here. To get the curves in the third dimension here, the curves that taper down to the wings, I like to use my drum sander, which happens to have a 5-inch diameter, which is just aesthetically and functionally perfect for the size of curve that I need to taper down to these wings. I actually have the machine unplugged here, and I'm manually turning the drum by pulling on the belt that runs down to the motor. This is just far more comfortable for me because it's kind of a dicey operation when you're running the machine. Now this is a 2 horsepower motor, so it's a very powerful drum sander here. When I'm holding these tiny little bridges and pressing them into the drum while the machine is running, I don't like to do that, so I prefer to actually unplug it and do it by hand, and I can get it done almost as quick, but a lot safer and a lot more comfortably that way. Now it's important to note that I pre-carved these with a chisel before I got to this stage. Otherwise, I would have been sitting here at the drum for a very long time.
If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.